Hi, I'm Melody.
And I'm Candi.
And you're listening to
Quirks, Bumps,
and Bruises. We are glad that you're here because we are going to talk church stuff, y'all. It is Melody, it's Candi, it's Parker Webb, it is Ben Webb, no relation that we know of. But we want to talk a little bit about church, pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a statistic here. On average, and this is Lifeway research, on average, churches are at 85% of their pre-pandemic attendance level. So 85%. And because of those reduced rates, 68% of churches have congregations now of fewer than 100 people, including 31% who even have fewer than 50 people. So, Ben, you are a pastor, so you know he was the pastor of my church. He's now the pastor of another congregation. And I've talked to I don't know how many different church pastors and situations, and you're at Green Street in High Point. Parker, Candi, you go to a church in Summerfield. Do you see a difference post-pandemic?
So
did your attendance drop? I'll say that. Has it been hard to pull back in?
We actually are 100 to 200 above where we were. But here's how our situation, we're a mid-sized church. I mean, we're above average in our size, just the facts of our size. We lost 200 to 300 that are not returning.
Wow.
And one of them is a businessman in town, and I see him on a regular basis. And he's no bones about it. No, we just got out of going, and we're just not going back. He was one of our ushers. Faithful usher.
Yeah.
And his excuse was, well, y'all quit passing the plates, and so I quit going to church. I didn't have a job. Now, it's an excuse. That's an excuse. He should be finding something else.
That's about as big of an excuse as I've ever heard.
Unbelievable. So you have that group that left, never to return. Now, we had a lot of churches that were on the brink of closing their doors pre-pandemic. They closed their doors. And so they are just transplanted from their churches that closed their doors, and now they've come to our church. But we did a lot of reevaluating because you get in a rut. And I think we had been in a 20, 30-year rut at Green Street where we had 3 different services. Not saying that it was wrong pre-pandemic, but we had an acoustic style setup in our fellowship hall. We had a, in quotes, contemporary service. It was contemporary progressive for Green Street. And then we had a traditional. Choir was in robes, organ played on every song. And so I asked Pastor, I came on in April of 2020.
Whoa.
My first Sunday was Easter of 2020.
Wow.
And it was Pastor Brandon, myself, and our audio guy up in the sound booth. Not a soul in a 1,000-seat auditorium. So I asked Pastor, I said, hey, during this pandemic, why don't we just combine? I believe we can do multi-generational worship, which is what we are, in the same room at the same time. And it's worked for us. And, you know, this past Sunday, we did a song that was released less than a year ago by Shane and Shane called You've Already Won. We rolled right into the original, traditional Amazing Grace. Without My Chains Are Gone, original in its form. And then we did the old Southern gospel tune Until Then as the choir special before the message.
To me, that is the perfect worship service.
It was a wonderful time of worship. And Ben knows this. I totally believe in blended worship. Absolutely.
There's no reason that the choir can't sing, the praise team can't be singing. Right. You sing a hymn, you sing a Southern gospel song, and you do a praise chorus of some kind. All in the same service.
That's right. And
to me, that's great.
All it takes is a little bit of extra research, because in 2024, I can literally look and plan an entire service from my phone. I can pull all the charts. I can do everything from my phone, and it's right there. So you can do it without jerking their heads, big organ piece, bom, 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 to go into something that is very progressive, contemporary on guitars, electric guitars and drums. So you can make it flow very easily. It just takes a little bit of thought.
And it takes a worship leader that helps guide them.
You have to
through that.
Carry them on the journey.
You may not like this song, but just hang on, because you will like this one coming up. And then it kind of, if your congregation is more spiritually mature, I think that works very well. But sometimes you have to guide that, guide that a little bit.
You nailed it. The maturity level of your people in saying, oh, hey, worship is not about you. That is an act of you serving God and you worshiping God.
That's hard to get across these days.
It is, because we're a preferential society. It's my preference, me mentality.
Right.
Y'all, that's not church.
Yeah.
I mean, it's God right here, your brother and your sister right here, and then your last, and you prefer your church member, friend, and brother and sister before yourself.
You don't have the separation too. Like everybody's together, and I just love that.
It's been a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
So we're thankful.
2 to 3 to 4, however many services you have separate churches, to me is not a good thing.
It can be segregating.
I'm going to ask Ben. He was actually with me at our church that's the hardest, Ben, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Our church worked really hard during that time. Sure. Ben especially. Yeah. But just kind of your take on, all during COVID. And then also you can get in even to the multiple services. You just go for it and talk about it all.
Well, I can't say with the church I'm serving now because I haven't been there but since March. But when we were at Crestwood, we didn't lose anybody during COVID. We did work really hard to keep everybody together. I'll say that COVID didn't cause anything. It just revealed what was already there.
Good.
COVID gave people an excuse whose hearts were not already committed to come back. But all COVID did was separate the sheep and the goats.
Yeah.
So people who were not committed before have no reason to come back. The guy you was talking about that didn't have a job anymore. Well, now that he's no longer visible, he's not there.
That's right.
He's a businessman. He wants to be visible. That's
absolutely. Oh, he's visible.
Yeah.
It's just not,
So it didn't cause anything. It just revealed what was already there. Church attendance is going to continue across the board to decline because church used to be part of the social fabric. You don't need church now for your social activities. So the people that are going to come to church are the people who are serious about knowing Christ. And if people are not truly being discipled and they're not disciples themselves, they have no reason to get up on Sunday morning and invest themselves in a local congregation. So again, COVID didn't cause anything. And we're only going to see more of this. Now, the church I'm pastoring right now is growing, and I'm thankful for that. And it's good to see churches growing. I'm not saying that's impossible in this time. I think the churches should be growing. Just reality is, though, disciples take the church seriously. People who are not disciples don't. And COVID gave people an excuse not to anymore.
So with that, let me ask you guys a question. Do you think live streaming church services has been a hindrance or a help? Now, I wanted to, first of all, let me preface that by saying for homebound, I get it. That gives them a chance to be a part of their church. So let's take that and put it to the side. But as you know, during COVID, that just upped itself times 1,000.
For sure.
Do you think in the whole picture that has been a hindrance? Because I have heard so many people say, well, now I can just sit at home in my pajamas and watch it.
Right.
Why should I have to get up and go? So do you think it's hurt the church?
Let me give two answers. The answer from the perspective of the church and the answer from the perspective of pastors. From the church, it did give people an excuse to stay home. Now, like you said, the homebound people, I am so thankful we have them for them.
Yes, absolutely.
But I've had friends tell me, now I can just stay in bed and watch it. Well, staying in bed is not the same thing as gathering. It's not the ecclesia. It's not gathering with God's people. There's no accountability. And quite frankly, if you're in your bed watching it, you're also on your phone scrolling. So I think it's been a hindrance in that way. I would say for pastors too, it automatically gave every pastor in America a chance to be a TV evangelist.
Yeah.
So now the market's so saturated. If I was sick one Sunday and I got on Facebook and looked, every service is live stream. Everybody is doing it. That's necessarily a bad thing, but it also gave pastors access to something they didn't have before. And not everybody needs that access. Not everybody should have that access.
That's right.
So it's not necessarily quality that's going out. Either. Now, the people we've had visit recently, they're going to check you out online before they ever show up.
Oh, yeah.
So there, it's a positive too. It's just anything that humans can use for good, they will find a way also to use for evil.
That's right.
And so even live streaming is the same way. It's going to be used for the flesh for those who want to use it for the flesh.
That's right.
What if churches stopped live streaming and just put their services on? Actually, our church does that. There's different reasons for that, internet related, but if you didn't live stream it live, but then waited and just put it on like we did during COVID, do you think that would make any difference?
Here's what we've done as of late. And We rolled it out earlier this year. So we found that there were a lot of folks, those couple hundred, that were not showing back up. They were watching us online. We decided to cut. So we would go live only in one service. We have two services, 8:30 and 11. So in our 11 o'clock service, that's the only service that's live streamed. Mm-hmm. Once that service concludes, we cut the music off. And it goes from the point pastor gets up to the invitation, and that's it. So if they want the full worship experience, they are going to have to show back up. If you are truly homebound and you're not just laying out, well, 8:30 is kind of early if you're going to sleep in. So if they're going to watch, they're going to have to get up early. So we knocked that out. 11 o'clock, well, your day is halfway through. So you've gotten distracted, and we found that through our analytics, most people were watching later on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
So they were doing whatever they wanted to do, go to the farmer's market or whatever on Sunday morning, and then they were coming back to say that they were going to church.
Yeah.
So we're narrowing it down to where, hey, we're back to the biblical form of church in person there, worshiping as one unit.
I feel like sometimes you kind of have to, you almost have to tell people what they need to do. Does that make sense?
But that's
shepherding.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what that's being a shepherd.
Sometimes you just have to make decisions. You know, if half of my church is watching live now, laying in their bed, we're not going to do that anymore.
Okay, so
we're going to try a different approach
to
our
earlier conversation about the kids. Children long for discipline and structure. We're just grown children. We might be 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 90.
We still don't know nothing.
We need structure.
We do.
And that's missing a lot, I think, don't you, in the church today is
the church, the government of the church, the government of the nation, the government of the home was all God's idea.
That's right. That's right.
So God knows that human beings, especially in a fallen world, need structure.
That's right.
And the gathering, when it comes to the fellowship, when it comes to corporate worship, the word, the gathering, that structure can't be replaced. Every week might not be a home run.
Yeah, that's right.
And every week you might not leave thinking, I am so glad I was at church or I was with God's people today. But it's line upon line, precept upon precept. It's that habit week in and week out that builds a person long-term over life. It's a brick every week.
Yep, that's right.
So you might not have a week where you leave thinking, man, that was the most amazing thing, but a brick was laid.
That's right.
And it's that structure that's important. Going back to what we were saying earlier, it just hit me as we were talking. The discussion is really not live stream or not live stream. The discussion is the human heart.
That's right.
Because the human heart will either make the thing good and use it for the glory of God, or the human heart will either use the thing as an excuse. So live stream is a great thing. Just like microphones are a great thing. And just instruments are a great thing. It's just depending on how we use it. And so really the question that we're asking is, how can we best shepherd people to use it right? More than live stream or not live stream, it's how can we shepherd them to use it right. At the end of the day, it's whether their heart wants to follow Christ or not. That's the core of it.
I feel like the enemy just had such a fun time during COVID, and he's still having such a fun time, post COVID. But I feel like that we've made it kind of easy for him.
Yeah. On both sides, and I mean,
on both sides,
we had hyper conservative but hyper liberal folks in our congregation that were getting ramped up, and I mean, going for the jugular. And so I stood in front of my choir and I told them, I said, you will not speak of this pandemic or this COVID thing that's going on. I don't care where you stand on it. We are here to worship. We are here to be discipled. We are here to serve each other and love each other, because the enemy was having a heyday in our church.
We had something similar to that early on. And there were those who wanted to wear masks, those who didn't want to wear masks. We approached it. Now, what we knew at the time is completely different than now. We have different knowledge now, but what we knew at the time, masks were helpful. So we asked people, we never said you have to wear a mask, but we asked people to wear a mask and keep distance from each other. Some didn't want to do that. Some saw that as a infringement on their liberty. And so the way we approached that, though, you remember I stood up one Sunday.
Ben handled this very well.
There was you could see the division brewing over it.
For sure. And
I stood up one Sunday and I said, we as a church are going to operate through the rest of this pandemic and the rest of our time together on the law of love. So those of you who choose not to wear a mask, that is your right.
Yep.
And I am not going to have any problem with you, just as much as I ask you not to have a problem with those who do wear a mask. We're going to love each other, and we're not going to base our fellowship based on which ones are wearing masks and which ones are not.
That's correct.
And that kind of took care of it.
And it did. It nipped it in the bud in our church. And we did not, through COVID, we did not have any COVID-related issues through the whole pandemic because at the beginning we just set it up. We're going to have different opinions on this, and we didn't have all the information anyway. So most of our opinions weren't right anyway.
Yeah, totally.
But that being said, we're going to have different opinions, so we're going to operate off of the law of love, putting our brother above ourselves, like it says in Philippians, esteeming him, thinking more highly of him than you think of yourself. Sure. When you set that mindset, and you think of his needs higher than you think of your needs, then if he wants to wear a mask, good for him. If he doesn't want to wear a mask, good for him.
That's right.
And it really did settle it.
It did.
In our church. And anytime anything did come up, we went back to, we're operating on the law of love here. Not the law of liberty.
That's right.
Not I can do what I want to do, but love, I'll do what's best for my brothers and sisters.
Absolutely. That is so well said.
I think, again, that time showed the heart.
It did.
And I have to say, it was a hard time. And I was on staff at the time, and Ben led us through that just perfectly, beautifully. But I have to say, when all was said and done, I don't know, proud is not the good word. I just don't know another word to say. I was proud of our church during that time.
And as you should be, because I'm telling y'all.
Well, some churches are closed now.
I know.
Completely. Their churches are for sale.
There are churches that are not meeting in person.
It blows my mind. And there again, the enemy is having a heyday.
Oh, yeah.
And they're using the smallest little items to big items. We had a major outbreak. I was on the road, so I left on a Sunday morning, and we were down at First Baptist Spartanburg in South Carolina, and there was a funeral for one of our dear pillars of the church, and they requested that the choir sing. So one of my associates, he led the choir in some specials. Well, sure enough, there was an outbreak, and they went back. Well, word got back to the widow of that pillar that an outbreak took place, and several were hospitalized because of the funeral of her husband. Well, no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
I was not at that funeral, and I ended up getting COVID 2 days later. So there were 5 or 6 avenues, but that precious, dear woman, I know, she went into depression. So I'm telling y'all, Satan had a heyday.
Oh, he did.
Heyday.
Oh, he's still kind of doing that,
He is. And so, but I love how y'all dealt with that at Crestview, and sure. I think it's wonderful.
The difference is, too, though, we're not a large church by any means, but we did have a good, solid group of people.
Absolutely.
And again, that's what was shown during that time, that the people did love each other. They did love the Lord. If the people had not loved each other and loved the Lord the way they did, that same conversation would have fallen on deaf ears.
That's right.
It really made
sure.
And I think the doors would be locked now.
Totally.
That could have really, it would have probably taken our church under, so. Well, that is such a great topic for us to discuss. We could probably even come back and do a part 2, 3, 4, or 5 on this. But thank you guys so much for being along with us.
I know. It was great. We will definitely have to have y'all back very soon.
Thanks, guys, for being our guest on Quirks, Bumps, and Bruises.
Thanks for listening to the Quirks, Bumps, and Bruises podcast with Candi and Melody. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and share the podcast. You can learn more at joyfm.org.
Try Peas and Carrots podcast for more encouragement. Brian and Kayla share life from their piece of the vegetable patch. Expect a laugh, find common ground, and hear stories you can't wait to share. It's a podcast about doing life together, growing in Christ together, and learning to laugh no matter what comes your way. Search Peas and Carrots podcast wherever you listen to podcasts today.